Hey everyone, Josh here. So behind me here, got my V10 TDI Touareg that I'm doing an automatic transmission oil change on. If you've been following the page, or the channel I guess, this engine's been out on a skid longer than it's been in the car during my ownership. So I've got it back in and I've got about 1,000 kilometers on it. I've got a few little issues which I'm still working out the bugs on that yet. But a major issue is I ended up with a transmission oil leak at the cooler fitting. As you can see, it looks like engine oil pretty well from how black it is, so I decided it's as good a time as any to do a transmission oil change. So this is going to be a quick video on how to do it on this Touareg. So this would be applicable to the T1 or 7L Touaregs. From 04 to I imagine 08. So let's see what I have for parts and tools, and I'll get started at it. So this is an 09D transmission code, 6-speed automatic transmission. It's an Aisin TR60 transmission. It's not made by Volkswagen themselves. It was originally supposed to be a lifetime fill transmission, which same thing with some of the Mark IVs and stuff. The lifetime's probably what the lifetime of the warranty, and then it's going to be junk. So people recommend around 60 to 80,000 miles. This one has just a hair over 100,000 miles, and I wouldn't imagine it's been changed. So the oil. So I've got a Fuchs Titan ATF 400. I can't get it to zoom, but ultra high performance ATF. So it'll be great behind the V10, I guess. The oil is Volkswagen oil is G055025, which this stuff says it's compatible. I've got the gasket, some spacers, I assume, so you don't squish the gasket too much. The filter itself, and then miscellaneous O-rings. You can get kits from your favorite online retailer. This one was from ID Parts. You can choose different types of oil. Fuchs seems to be a fairly high quality oil, so I'll use that for this one. As far as tools, if you're doing this yourself, you obviously have the few specialty Volkswagen tools, such as the metric socket set, triple squares, Allens and Torx, so I'm not going to cover precisely what every bolt size you need, but aside from the basics, you need a transmission fluid pump. If you're familiar with these bottom fill transmissions, the same as the DSGs or pretty well any of the automatics, you have to fill through the bottom. Any that I've done, I usually cheat and fill through the top through the filter housing, but you obviously can't see the top of the transmission in these things. So I bit the bullet and got a fluid pump. And then you're going to need Rostec, VCDS, or some way to measure transmission oil temp, because it has to be at between 35 to 45 degrees Celsius to check the level with it running. So yeah, I'm going to get this turned around because it needs to be running, so I'll get the exhaust pointing out, and we'll get started. So I've got it turned around, so the exhaust will be going out the door. So this isn't necessary, or you don't have to do this. I've got a leak at the transmission cooler thermostat valve, so I took the lines off there. That valve right there, you can see the oil dripping out of it. And then you got the two lines just dripping down. I don't think I'm going to get much out of it, but I guess a very little bit helps. So I'm going to put a jack under it and then go to the back and start draining back there. So here's the transmission pan. So here's going to be the drain, and this one's going to be your fill. So we're going to drain it obviously, and then we're going to pull all these bolts out, drop the pan so we can clean the magnets and change the filter. So I got as much as I could get out to the drain hole, so there's still going to be some in there, so I imagine it's going to make a bit of a mess. So I guess we'll see what happens here. Not as bad as I thought. So there's your filter there. There's a bunch of oil in the sump there, so I'll pop the filter off first, and then we'll go to the bench and clean the sump out. Here's the oil that came out. There's only about 4 liters that I got out of there. You should get roughly 6 to 7 on this drain and refill method. The transmission holds anywhere between 10 and 12 for a dry fill. The rest of it will be in nooks and crannies in the transmission that you can't get out, as well as the torque converter. So this is yeah, about 7 liters is what you'll get out, and that's about what you'll put back in. The kit came with 9, so I should have lots to spare. So here's the pan. So here's the rear side. So that's my drain that I drained it out of. And then this is the fill. So if that gives you any better idea, when you fill it up, when you're filling from the bottom there, you're filling your pan full, and the level will be the height of this insert. So that'll be, if you're too low, then your oil level will only be there. If you get too high, it'll spill in. So once the trans is up to temp, you pull that plug out, and then anything that's too high will spit out the bottom and drain out into your pail. So that's a quick and easy way to check it. So this pan has 5 magnets with steel, I guess, from use. So we will clean those up nicely. I've got a few tiny little specks of material. I don't know if it's out of what it's out of, but nothing too big. There's no big gears or a band or anything sitting in the bottom, so I'm fairly happy with that. So I'll brake clean it all up, put it back together, and then we're going to be ready to put the new filter on and refill it. So here's the old gasket. It's got a lip in it, so that's how it sits on the pan there. So this one, all those spacers have to get put in all those holes. So this kit came with new ones, so that's nice and handy. So I'll slide those in, and then that gasket will be ready to install. So I let this drain overnight, which was a big mistake. I cleaned up a bit there, but looks like somebody's murdered in here with all the red tranny fluid everywhere. So I'd maybe, once you have the pan drop, maybe plan on getting it put back together that night. I kind of ran out of time, so I didn't. So, got old filter off, the old O-ring out, new filter, the O-ring installed, lubed up the O-ring. It's ready to go back together. So I had a leak from my gasket seal, so I cleaned that all up. That was a little bit of emery cloth and some brake cleaner. We cleaned the pan up as well. It wasn't too bad. So now the pan can go back on. So here's my setup. So I got a short flexi line, long flexi line, and then right before it goes into the transmission there's a hard line. So this kit came with those 3 hoses. The hard line, you can kind of twist it so that it actually gets fluid into the pan, not just squirt it up and then right back on the ground. It took a few tries to kind of get that perfected. If you look back in the earlier in this video, you don't have to go up very far before you're into the pan. So it's only up a few inches, so I just put a little bend on the hose and stuck it up. So I've got 1 jug in, so let's start pumping away and we'll see how it goes. So I've got about 3.5 or so liters in there so far, and it's spitting out of the hole there now. So I'm going to reassemble the cooler line that I had off, and then we'll start it up and keep pumping, I guess. So there's 5, 6, there's a half in there, and probably another half liter in there, so 6.5 liters, and it's pouring out pretty good. So I'm going to get the drain plug in before I end up with another mess. So final count is 6.5 with it cold. As soon as you start it, you'll see a little dribble coming out the whole time while you're filling it. But once you know that you're full, it's going to start pouring out in a hurry. So I guess I should have included at the beginning, make sure you got lots of kitty litter or oil dry or something, because it's making quite the mess. So up next, I'm going to go and drive it around and get it up to temp, and then pull the fill plug and see if we have to add or subtract. So I just got back from my test drive, so I ran it up to through gears 1 through 6, up to about 100k or 120 and back down. It's probably about 5 minutes of run time. It sat outside for a few minutes while I swept up and kind of cleaned the floor up. So with your VCDS, you're going to number 2 auto trans, group 6, and there's your transmission fluid temperature. So it's a fairly cold day out, it's about 5 degrees, so it did not take long to get it hot. So I'm going to get prepped and should maybe let it cool down a little bit and then check fluid. So final check with the oil warm. Engine running, obviously. Pull your dipstick or the drain or the check tube out. Put your fill tube in, and then pumper full so it'll start spitting out again. You're going to get a bunch that dumps out when you first pull the plug, but it'll slow down to a trickle, so we're going to top it up so it starts pouring out again, and then put the check plug back in, and it's good to go. So the grand total was 7.5 liters. I ended up with a bit on the ground, but at least the ID Parts kit, they supplied, I think it was 9 liters, so I had lots. If you're going to do this yourself, make sure you get a good fill device. If you're from Canada, I got this one from Canadian Tire. It's just a Mastercraft or Motomaster or whatever it is fill device. It's a 1/2 liter per stroke, so it's a bit of a tug, but it's got a check valve in it, so you can just dip this tube into your oil container, and then that one can go up into your transmission. So that one actually worked pretty good, other than it was a bit of a workout, as you might have seen in some of the videos were a little shaky. So hopefully this video gave you some good guidance and you feel confident in servicing the transmission yourself. If you have any interest in watching some more videos on this V10, I just recently had this out, and well, obviously back in now. I just did it in my garage. There's nothing fancy in here. I used a skid and a pallet fork. Actually worked pretty slick, so I'll maybe do a drop down or a link or whatever to some of those earlier videos if you want to check that out. Up next, I've got a bit of a fueling issue. I've got a fuel filter helped it a bit, but I've still got another issue, so the next video will be diagnosing what's going on there, so stay tuned for that one if it's of any interest. So thanks for watching, and like and subscribe, I guess, if you found this helpful. Thanks.